Hello, hello, my brothers and sisters. This is Garrett Bake, your brother in arms, and welcome to another episode of The Tactical Businessman. Today's topic, ow, ow, ow. I am Sparta. So this weekend, my son and I got to do something really, really cool. We completed the Spartan trifecta. If you're not familiar with obstacle course racing, the Spartan races have been around for a while, 12 years at least now, or one of the original ones. And they have this really cool thing called the trifecta, which means that if you complete the 3 different lengths of races in one calendar year, you get a bigger medal, really is what it is. But it looks really cool. So my son and I decided, and actually it was his decision, that over Christmas/January, that he wanted to do this with me. And we set out to do this before he graduated, which is this week. Now, my son and I have not always had the best of relationships. When we got married, my wife and I, we weren't initially planning on having kids right away. We were going to wait a few years. She was going to graduate. I was going to graduate. We were going to have the house, the 2 cars, the dog, whatever. And then we were going to have kids. We wanted to make sure that we could provide a good life for them. Well, life has a way of saying, well, it's not your choice, it's mine. My wife and I had moved down here to Phoenix. She had graduated from college. I was still going to school. And it was, I think, October, November, maybe no, December. December, I think it was. Well, when we get her back on the show, we'll ask her. Well, she wasn't feeling really good, and there was a flu going around or whatever, so they told her to go get checked out. And we went down to this doctor, or this clinic, I think it was a Cigna clinic, and they drew her blood to see, what was going on. And we were just thinking, okay, she's going to get some medication and then go home. Well, the doctor comes in, and you guys know how these doctors do. I guess it's iPads now, but back then it was clipboards. So he walks in with his clipboard, and he's got his pen out, and he's like writing on the clipboard, and he's like, well, I got some good news and some bad news. And we're kind of inquisitively looking at each other. And, well, what's the bad news? And he's like, well, you don't have the flu. Not the bad news. Well, what's the good news? And he doesn't even look up. He's like, congratulations, you're pregnant. And then he turned around and he walked out of the room. And we sat there in stunned silence staring at each other. So my oldest, Jaden, came rather quickly. We'd been married a little over a year. In fact, the month of our year anniversary is when he was born. And here I am, still not a graduate from college, still not a really good, quote unquote, job, and a father. And we're trying to make this work. So I referenced the manual of marriage that doesn't exist. By the way, I think I'm going to write one. I think it'd be a good idea to write the manual of marriage and basically just leave it blank, charge a bunch of money for it. Anyway, so the manual of marriage never showed up, so I didn't know what to do. And I'm struggling trying to make ends meet and be a husband and now be a father. And really struggling was the best word because I didn't know what to do. So in order to have the flexibility of going to school and schedule and whatnot with my wife and me, I decided I was going to start my own business. So I started a window washing business. And I had this window washing business where I literally go just wash windows at residences. And it really sucked, especially in the summer in Arizona. Well, we couldn't really afford a babysitter. So sometimes I would bring my son with me in the car seat, set him down outside. I'd make sure he was in the shade, and I would wash windows. And this was it, right? I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is life. Now, this was me trying to figure out how to be a father. And for most of the men, yourself included, in this world, when babies are born, we have a really hard time because we like interaction, and there was no interaction from this child. It liked to eat, and it liked to poop, and it liked to sleep. And if it wasn't doing one of those things, it wanted to cry. Well, eventually, of course, the crawling happens and everything, and so the interaction starts to ramp up. Well, I was always an athlete, so I wanted my son to be an athlete too. When he got to 5 years old, I volunteered to coach soccer, and he didn't really want to play soccer, but I'm like, we're going to go play soccer, and I'm going to be your coach. And so he got forced to be out there playing soccer. Well, I remember during the games, for most of the games anyway, if you've been to a 5-year-old soccer match or 4-year-old, you know, they literally just chase the ball around the field. It's just a big clump of kids running back and forth. Well, my son would never really do that. He would just stand in the middle of the field and look at me. And I would get so pissed off and frustrated. And I'd yell and I'd scream and I'd whatever. And there was the start of the downfall of our relationship. And so I kept trying to push him into sports. And he didn't want to. And instead of focusing on what he wanted to do, I focused on what I wanted him to do, which drove this huge wedge into our relationship. And so for many years, we struggled. Probably for the next 10 years or so, we struggled. He didn't really want to spend time with me. He was really afraid of me. He really wouldn't share anything with me. And so no matter how I tried to buy him off with toys or candy or money or trips or whatever, we just didn't really have this relationship. And it was all based on my inability to be a good father because I didn't know how. Fast forward many years. I go down this path of, repairing and rebuilding my life, starting with my marriage, then with my kids and everything else. And of course, I get to him, and this was the biggest struggle for me. Not just because I damaged it, but because he was so much like me. Sure, he wasn't as loud or obnoxious as I am, but he had the same personality. He's very stubborn, very strong-willed, knew exactly what he wanted. And I really struggled with this. And it wasn't till I opened up and started to share my struggles with him that our relationship started to change. Now, it wasn't overnight. This was a multi-year process. And it took time because it had taken many more years of time to damage it in the first place. And so I would start with just sitting there with him and ask him questions. Most of the times he'd just shrug his shoulders or not say anything. Awkward, very awkward. And then I started hugging him again. And then I started giving him kisses on the forehead at night like I would my other kids. Awkward, very awkward. And then we started having more open conversations. And eventually he started sharing with me some of his struggles. Struggles when it came to school or girls or just life in general. Started sharing with me some of his interests, some of the things that he really liked doing. And none of the things that he liked doing did I like to do. Or like to do anymore, I should say. Now, if you've listened to this podcast, you know that I went through this period of time, again, when my life was struggling, where I found it more important to play video games than hang out with my wife or my kids. I would get home from work at 11, midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, and I'd stay up till 5, 6 in the morning playing video games, playing Call of Duty. Well, I didn't think that my son was paying attention. Yeah, I do it on Saturdays and some other times as well, but I didn't think he was paying attention. So guess what he wanted to do when I asked him? Well, he wanted to play video games, but not just any video games. He wanted to play the exact same video games that he'd seen me play. And so I'd get pissed off and frustrated. I'm like, why do you want to play video games? That's dumb. That's stupid. And looking back, it's like he just wanted to be like me. That was his way of wanting to connect. And so we got to this point where I'd quit trying to force what I wanted onto him, and we'd said, okay, well, what do you want? Well, he wanted to play video games. Okay, I didn't want to play video games because I'd passed that phase, right? But he wanted to, so I would sit and I would play with him a half hour, a couple times a day, or a couple times a week. We'd play video games together. And so he started to open up more. And then we'd start to do more things together that he liked to do. And eventually we got to the point where, we kind of are today, where every day we are exchanging messages. I'm sending him memes, or short videos, and he's sending me funny ones. And just this back and forth funny thing, and it's just this open level of communication that we have with each other, where I don't yell at him anymore like I used to, because our relationship has changed. Which leads me to the whole Spartan story. Again, he decided that he wanted to do something, because I said, hey, let's do something together before you graduate. You pick it, whatever it is, I don't care. One thing, many things, you pick it, let's do it. Well, I had done some Spartan races a few years prior, and he'd been out there to see me do it, and he wanted to do it. Again, this is the same son who never really wanted to be an athlete. So I said, okay, but we're going to train together, and we're going to do this together. And he agreed. And we did. So he had his weight training at school. I had, my gym time, but we would go run together. And we started off with the sprint, which is about 3 miles. Got through that. He was pretty excited. He missed a couple obstacles, had to do some burpees. In fact, he had to do 125 burpees. But for him, he said he never wanted to do that again. So we got to the second one, which was 8 to 9 miles. And we had to do more training for that. And he had to do more training. So then, he only failed a couple of obstacles, and he was able to do more of them. And then came the big one we just did. It was in Bear Lake or Big Lake. Big Lake? I don't know. Big Lake, Bear Lake in California. I think it's Big Lake or Bear Lake. Anyway, it's up in the mountains at the ski resort. 13 miles, 30 plus obstacles. And we've been training a few months for this one. And the amazing part was the second race, he died. He literally died in the middle of it. I'm pushing him uphill, dragging him downhill, helping him over obstacles. Like, he died. It was bad. And so I was really worried about this last one. But we stayed together. We kept pace, the pace that we wanted, and we finished together. And he actually completed more obstacles than I did. I had some hand issues, but he completed more obstacles than I did. And it was this sweet experience, this sweet feeling. When we crossed, they had this barbed wire right before the end of the finish line. And we crossed underneath this barbed wire, and we sat there for a second. There's a guy with a camera taking pictures, and we posed a little bit. And it was this sweet feeling of, wow, not an I did it, but a we did it. And as I was driving home, it was a 6-hour drive. I was driving home, I was looking over at my son, and we had this guy's weekend, right? He and I, and I was grateful for the place that our relationship was in. That he would talk and share with me, that we would communicate, that we were able to go through this struggle and this pain of this race together, which, by the way, took us 5.5 hours. 5.5 hours to complete. But the fact that we were able to do this together. And so I was thinking, like, what got us here? And it was simply a willingness to do two things: to listen and to act. To listen to my son about where he was at and what he wanted, and then to act on it. Not act on what I wanted to do, but what he wanted to do, or what he needed. So can you put a price tag on that? No, you can't. Is it something that's going to happen overnight? No, not really. But I can tell you this: if you invest the time, if you take the effort to do everything that you want to do, or to take the actions to get you there, you will get there. Your children are waiting for you. They're waiting for you to show up. They're waiting for you to be like a Spartan, to defend your wife and your kids at all costs. It's time to invest in them. Take time for them. Take time to do what they want, when they want, and how they want. And watch how your relationships will change for the better. All right, that's all I got for you. As always, stay safe. Listen, if you're at this point right now in your life, and I'm bringing this up right now, if you're at this point right now in your life where you're asking yourself, is this all there is? Is there a way to do this? I keep sharing these little tidbits with you, but if you're interested in the whole program, I could share that with you as well. Go to thetacticalbusinessman.com. Watch the videos. If it speaks to you, if it's time, then let's get rolling. No more delay. Let's create the life that you've always wanted. All right. Stay safe, and we'll see you on the next one.